Welcome to the Rethink Leadership Podcast with me, Jeremy Blain. I interview leaders, experts and business professionals from around the world who are bringing leadership principles and know-how into the digitally driven 21st century workplace, with focus firmly on the how-to rather than the what. Each episode is in aid of a charity chosen by my guests, and since 2020, we've made donations to over 80 global and local causes. Hello and welcome to Bill Dickinson. Bill is a seasoned leader with nearly 3 decades of experience in innovating and designing leadership development programs. His passion lies in equipping organisational leaders with essential competencies to thrive and empower others. With a doctorate in leadership development, expertise in coaching, facilitation and organisational development, Bill has positively impacted companies such as Boeing, Coca-Cola Bottling and AbbVie Biopharmaceutical. As an LGBTQ advisor to the Mayor of Atlanta, he is committed to fostering inclusive and diverse organisational cultures. We discuss Bill's journey in helping leaders find their authentic selves as a catalyst to impact others more successfully and be more fulfilled themselves. This episode is in aid of the American Civil Liberties Union as a thank you to Bill for joining us. This fabulous organisation defends and fights for the rights of all people across the USA without discrimination. Bill, hello. Thanks very much for joining me. Please introduce yourself, your passions, and tell us about your new book, Optimizing Self, a guided workbook to elevate your impact as a leader.
Thank you, Jeremy. I am thrilled to be present to you and to your audience. Delighted to be here. Like you, I am in the leadership space, and currently, I'm in the fall of my life and my career. I live in Midtown Atlanta, Georgia. I live with my partner, Cesar Mendoza. And I have been in the leadership space for about 30 years. And it is still a passion of mine. And I'm sure in the course of this interview, you'll understand why it's still a passion of mine. But at the end of the day, it's because I'm able, willing, committed to validating and celebrating another person's innate dignity, their own self-worth. And Jeremy, how that is expressed not only personally, but professionally. And I'm getting ready to retire to Valencia, Spain in probably about 2 years. That's a little bit about me.
Great. So tell us about your book, Bill.
So, Optimizing Self. It is my first book. I self-published. Optimizing Self. So my commitment is to the person, to everybody's person. That means their sense of self, what they believe about themselves, their ability to overcome themselves. So Optimizing Self is a guided workbook that thoughtfully, and I think engagingly, allows others to learn about self-awareness and its place in our person, to appreciate the value of feedback and how that informs who we are, and in some cases, why we are. Optimizing Self is about understanding and curating one's personal brand and their value proposition. So what it is professionally, we bring to the table that excites us and differentiates us. So I'm trying to optimize both our person and our professional understanding. And it's been published for about 4 months.
Yeah, and I was going to say congratulations on the launch, because I know it's been really successful
Thank
It's
you.
got a lot of comments and great reviews, and we'll make sure on the screen at the end for those tuning in, and on the show notes that the link to the book is there.
I would appreciate
Um,
that. Thank you.
yeah, and I there's a few things I love. I like the way you describe it, the fall of your life and your career. That's a nice way of doing it. I would call it autumn, of course. But but yes, I get that. And yeah, so you've moved to Atlanta with your partner, and you're going to move to Valencia, Spain. So is Cesar Spanish, is he?
He is from Venezuela.
Ah,
So
Venezuela. So
he's been in the States. He's been in the
yeah,
States for 30 years, and he'll be as I'm learning Spanish right now,
right.
he'll be able to guide me and confidently help me navigate Valencia because I'm English speaking.
Yeah. Well, don't worry. If you need a bit of English speaking, you're only 2 hours away from the UK, and you can pop to London and just have
Yes, you're
a
right. I
good
can
old
just
chat
hop
there,
over to the
can't you?
pond.
Yeah, no problem. Well, hola to Cesar as well, and thank you again for that introduction. And you talked about the who and the why about who we are to understand ourselves and start thinking about our authentic selves, and being our authentic selves as leaders and professionals is so much more important to employees these days as they're choosing who to work with and for in many cases. So why is it that some leaders still find it difficult to, if you like, take off the mask, if you like?
You know, taking off a mask requires some vulnerability. It requires some humility. And Jeremy and audience, I think we're in a transition from, in many ways, like an imperial form of leadership to a more human-centered approach to leadership. And so if we're going to be human-centered, we have to be vulnerable. So that means we have to be able to own the disruptions of our own lives. And my operating premise as a leader is we all have disruptions, if not some dysfunctions, that prevent us from being our very best selves. So I need to be vulnerable with the fact, for instance, that Bill Dickinson, have a hard time regulating myself. Now, I'm much better at it today, but if I have to name a weakness, it's self-regulation. How do I come across to people, both verbally and non-verbally? 15 years ago, oblivious to it. Today, much more attentive to it, which makes me more impactful and empathic with others. So it's still difficult being vulnerable. And yet, I think the people who work for us and with us, they want to see a human-centered, thoughtful, competent leader today. And we're kind of learning that. We're kind of dancing with that right now, I think.
Yeah, I would summarize that by saying they just want to see somebody human, period. Who's able to, and I get that point about vulnerability, and I guess the flip side of that coin being courage, and the courage to say that I don't know it all as a leader, and that let's work on this together. And you're
Yep.
right, there are still leaders out there that are oblivious to it, and are not owning the disruption and the dysfunction, either in their lives or in their working lives too.
Well, and the advantage to that, so if I have the privilege and the responsibility of leading others, building a business, growing a customer base, that means I have to be not only skilled and attentive to them, but I think it's hard to build something if you're not attending to yourself. So it's an inside out approach. If I want to be credible out there, I need to be integral and honest in here. And when those two coalesce, that's when I think authenticity is at its very best. Because I recognize too, Jeremy, that we all have emotional dirt. We do. We all have stuff. We come to work with stuff. We do our best to manage that stuff, sometimes better than others. But my people who work with me, for me, need to understand I have empathy for their stuff. And therefore, it makes it just a little bit more interpersonal together.
Yeah, that's right. There's always another person or persons in that relationship, whether it's at work or at life, of course. And picking up on that, and I'm going to use you as an example here, as your own self-leadership journey, if you like, and getting to that authentic self has been challenging and ultimately rewarding, I'm absolutely sure. And you talk about it's merely 15 years ago when you've kind of turned that corner. You came out as a gay man at the age of 52. If you don't mind, tell us please about that journey and the breakthroughs personally and with others that you had to make to find that self.
And it's funny, I benchmark my life from 15 years ago. So at the time, I was an ordained Roman Catholic priest of 25 years. And I was doing leadership development for the Roman Catholic hierarchy. So bishops, archbishops, cardinals, pastors. I had been doing it, Jeremy, for about 8 years with and for them. And there were two turning points. One is I'm teaching leadership to bishops who are relatively hungry for it. And we always began with self-leadership. So, but what I found was I was not exercising self-leadership because I was not being honest and open about myself as a gay man. Now, unfortunately, in the Roman Catholic Church, they don't really want you to disclose that. Okay, you can be it, but they don't want you to talk about it. And it felt disingenuous to me. So I was settling into a conflict of my own self-leadership as I'm delivering self-leadership. The second thing, Jeremy, is I engaged in a 360, a formal 360 process with my direct reports, with my peers, with manager, with, in this case, clients, bishops, and so forth. The 360 was quite revealing. It validated lots of good business stuff. He's good at an external audience. He can engage a crowd. He can sell our services. He delivers strong material. But what I found out in that 360 is that I was not highly approachable and I was rather intimidating. So my tone, my non-verbal behaviors were unattractive. And pretty universally, the feedback was, he's good at what he does, but we don't really enjoy hanging with him. And that devastated me. It was not acceptable. So I decided to engage an executive coach to work with me on better understanding emotional intelligence and my own self-regulation. That helped me settle into own who you are, Bill, be proud of it, and it might be time to move on. And so I did that. and I've not looked back. Does that provide some context there?
Yeah, yeah, it does. It's
Surprise.
and quite a surprise as well. Yes, absolutely. So just going back to one of my other guests, is that how you know Matthew Brackett?
So I know Matthew because as he was discerning whether he would leave Roman Catholic priesthood,
Yeah.
he was referred to me as somebody who had left and actually left priesthood honorably. So I left it in a thoughtful, respectful way. So I became an informal sounding board to a very good man as he was discerning, do I stay in priesthood or do I leave? A gay man to a straight man.
Yeah. I say, well, yeah, so you've become the the go-to ex-priest now for those thinking of a
There have been several other
really.
conversations with men who are trying to make the same decision,
Yeah.
the best decision for them, whatever it is, whether they stay in priesthood or they leave.
I would call that a beautifully niche coaching assignment. So it sounds like there's a lot of learnings personally there, and
Yeah.
it strikes me that there is, on one side, it's about personal identity and where that intersects with sort of professional leadership, how you would talk about that too. So could you tell us your own journey of discovery in that, and whether you have other examples you can share?
Yeah, my personal identity is in part connected to me being a gay man, but it was a part that I was not owning, so I had to own that. My identity is wrapped up in being a thoughtful man, a thought leader, uh, an admired friend, a competent coach. So that intersection there is very important to me professionally, because as I work with people in executive coaching or senior leadership development, my first job is to honor who they are, however they are. And some of them are in better places than not. So my commitment to self, I'd like to believe, transfers or translates to their commitment to self, even though that may be hard. It might be hard for them to go there. But Jeremy, what was real critical here, and I think I'd love to share this with your audience, is this 360 review was really, it was life-changing. It was enlightening. It was validating. And in my case, I definitely had some emotional intelligence work to do. But I need the informed opinions, insights, and thoughts of others. In fact, we all do. And a 360 is a way for us to gather that information, to learn from it, think through it, and grow. Because if we don't have that 360 information, our observation of self is pretty one-sided. So I need it to be informed. And any of our audience there, it is a rich, validating experience, though at times there may be something difficult you'll have to wrestle with. Does that help?
Absolutely, it helps. And it leads me to an obvious next question for people like yourself and others who have gone through that journey of self-discovery and had the epiphany of sorts. And then that that movement from awareness to positive action in some ways, how does that help them, and you, of course, within that journey, become better people managers and leaders?
Mhm.
And what are the benefits for self and others?
Right. So for me, I needed to work on my ability to present myself more thoughtfully, more empathically. I wanted to do so less judgmentally, because what people were observing in me was unattractive. So, um, for me, I made a commitment to understand what it means to regulate my trigger points. So my triggers are, I have high expectations, and when my expectations aren't being met, I get frustrated, and I might take it out on somebody, not in an abusive way, but in a tone that is just it's unattractive. So I had to learn self-regulation in terms of how I choose to handle myself when I'm disappointed, frustrated, or angry. People value when you can regulate yourself. I had to learn to up my EQ in terms of how I socially interact with others, and really, Jeremy, create safe spaces for my team and others to collaborate together, to communicate together, to value one another. So self-regulation, EQ, and my own study of people leadership has enabled me to say to other leaders, if you want to elevate your game, then do it on the people side of things. Okay. Empower them, give them autonomy, give them some sense of agency, help them to value their role and why it's important both to them and to the company. So I spend a lot of time now developing others so that they can appreciate who they are and why they are.
Yeah, and that's what you were talking about before is so important. And only then really can they talk about, right, what do I need to do for myself and others, and how do I do it so I'm impacting others in the right way and
Right. Right.
empowering them, or in helping them grow too, and the obvious benefits that comes from that. So
Right.
I get that journey, and I'm sure those leaders tuning in who are resonating with this and who want to move the dial in terms of developing their own authentic and compassionate leadership, let's say, will want to hear now from you the big tips that you could give for them to make some progress on that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps, if I ask you this as well, if we don't do that as leaders, what's the cost?
What are the consequences?
Hmm.
Thank you for asking. So, audience, you who are my colleagues, okay, um, please make a commitment to spending time with yourself, understanding yourself, celebrating yourself in all of your strengths and in some of your weaknesses. A tip for you to better do that is breathing, it's mindfulness, it's meditation, but it's also consulting with others in feedback.
Hmm. Hmm.
Genuinely asking for, talk to me about how I did in that presentation last week. I felt like I was going too quickly. Could you give me some feedback? So we have to be specific when we ask for feedback. That is a tip. We have to be non-defensive, make a commitment, no matter what's said, I'm going to say thank you for the observation. A tip from me as a people leader is please meet with your folks one-to-one. So one-to-one meetings are critical to building communication and connection between you and those who might work for you and with you. Another tip would be to understand what psychological safety is and how, in fact, it can be facilitated, even though you may not have the confidence to do it yourself. And I'm going to be a big proponent of not only understanding what it is and its value. So that means people come together authentically, non-defensively. They can raise a question without second guessing somebody's going to judge it or slap it down. Coupled with psychological safety is identify 4 norms, 4 essential norms that you and your team will not violate. You define them together, you actualize them together, but you will not violate those 4 norms. You collectively decide on the norms, but they anchor who you are. And read about EQ, read about the place of asking questions and how that facilitates coaching, whether that's formally or informally. So those are some of my best practices or tips for the audience. You want me to share a few benefits? Yeah. So in that case, Jeremy and others, it's confidence. It's improved competence. It's your ability to be more approachable and accessible in a way that feels comfortable for others. You absolutely ensure stronger communication if you're meeting with your folks every other week for 30 minutes. If you don't do it, it'll likely mean less engagement between team members together and you. It might be, I've got an eye always looking for that next opportunity because I'm not feeling quite safe or valued here. A consequence is going to be we're not able to develop them in a really effective way. Okay, I'm going to be quiet and let you talk away.
Great. No, thank you very much. And picking up on something that resonated with me, those 4 norms that you talked about, that I just like the spirit behind them, of they're being defined together, lived together, you're growing together, you're succeeding together, you're handling the tough times together, you're dealing with the problems. And you're so right. If the leader can move away from supervision and become so emotionally supportive as much as anything else to the teams, then the confidence of the team and them and the communication and collaboration can just absolutely sing. It's just been such a great go on, Bill.
Well, if I may, in my book, okay, and it's in my book, I speak to the place to 4 norms and their value and how to get to them. So there's a process involved there. And I promise I'm not plugging the book. I'm plugging the fact that you can better understand 4 norms and how to engage them. So I'm trying to give a resource.
Yeah, so if you're not going to plug your book, I'm going to plug your book then. So Bill's book is Optimizing Self, a guided workbook to elevate your impact as a leader. Bill, where can people get hold of that?
It is on Amazon. You go to amazon.com and you simply type in Optimizing Self and it'll pop up. It is nicely reviewed, thankfully. Timothy Clark, an expert on psychological safety, has endorsed it. And there really are practical tips for you individually as well as for teams.
And that's so important, getting to the how-to behind this. So everyone, it's on Amazon, and the author you're looking for is Bill Dickinson. And people, I'm sure people tuning in, Bill, will want to get hold of you as well. How do they connect with you, find out more?
Thank you. You can certainly find me on LinkedIn at Bill Dickinson. My email is bill.dickinson@c3leadership.org. I have a website at c3leadership.org, and I would welcome the opportunity to support any of you, develop you, guide you, empower you, and we do that together.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Bill. It's been a great conversation with a surprise in the middle of that one now. So I can confidently say that I've bagged 2 Catholic priests for my podcast. So I've got to pull my finger out around rabbis and imams because I don't have any others. So I really appreciate your time and your thoughtful approach to this and your own self-discovery. It's a great lesson and a great story for others to think about, but also play back in their own way. Thank you very much, Bill.
And please continue to do what you're doing as we continue to rethink leadership. All right. Bye.
Nicely put, sir. Goodbye. Thanks for tuning in to the Rethink Leadership Podcast with me, Jeremy Blain. Please like, comment, and support us on your favourite platform, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch as well as listen to each episode.